Am I the only one who never heard this? Stop buying the same old textbook lies. Here's what they hid right under your nose. When we get through telling you this, you will know that Africa and America is really the same land, same people. They're still trying to divide and conquer you guys. There's no number but one. Buckle up. Picture this. 1492. Columbus lands in the Caribbean and the locals hand him gold-tipped spearheads, made with African metalwork no European could match. Colossal stone heads in Mexico, faces carved with African features, staring back across the Atlantic. Ancient skeletons, African crops, and tales of black mariners, buried so deep most textbooks won't even whisper them. The truth? Africans crossed the Atlantic centuries before Columbus. And in fact, Africans and Americans are close relatives, really the same people. Still think you know history? Subscribe if you're ready for the truth they don't teach in school. The Smithsonian Institution is partially responsible for this, you know. History often tells us the world's oceans were insurmountable barriers, keeping continents and cultures apart until Columbus in 1492. But this story is a big lie. What if ancient mariners crossed the Atlantic long before Europeans, forging connections lost to time? Evidence in stone, soil, and plants challenges the idea that ancient peoples were isolated and incapable of such journeys. Persistent anomalies, shared art, mysterious seeds, and legends demand we reconsider the past with open minds. The journey to understanding begins with a question. Did they come before Columbus? The evidence suggests yes. The year is 1492, and you're standing on the shores of what you think is Asia. You're Christopher Columbus, and you've just been handed something that will challenge everything you think you know about your discovery. The natives of Hispaniola have given you spearheads. Not just any spearheads, but ones tipped with a precise mixture of gold, silver, and copper. But this alloy would be impossible to create without advanced metallurgical knowledge, and this alloy matches exactly what African kingdoms had been making for thousands of years. But this evidence, it's about to disappear into the depths of history. Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. And no, I'm not just talking about the obvious fact that you can't discover a place where people are already living. I'm talking about something far more significant, evidence that African Moors had not only reached the Americas but had been trading with its people for centuries before Columbus ever set sail. This isn't some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. No, this is documented history that's been painstakingly buried by white historians, and we're about to uncover why. But before we continue, if you like the content we share here on the channel, please subscribe. It helps us spread the truth and bring awareness to the real history that needs to be taught. Our food reveals ancient connections, telling stories that stretch across continents and centuries. Every bite we take is a link to a past shaped by migration, trade, and unexpected encounters. Watermelon, native to Africa, somehow appears in the Americas before Columbus, far too early for European contact to explain its presence. Its seeds and images are found in pre-Columbian sites, raising questions about how it crossed the vast Atlantic. The jack bean, widely cultivated in the Americas, has its closest wild relative growing in Africa. This surprising connection hints at a transatlantic journey, suggesting that ancient peoples may have exchanged crops long before recorded history. Even more astonishing, traces of American tobacco and coca have been discovered in Egyptian mummies. Corn is indigenous to America, but the ancient Egyptians in Africa had corn for thousands of years before Columbus was even born. This evidence suggests that trade or contact between continents may have occurred thousands of years before 1492. Hybrid cotton, with genetic material from both hemispheres, and African gourds unearthed in ancient American sites, challenge the old idea that these worlds were completely isolated from each other. These are not just myths or legends, but scientific evidence, botanical fingerprints that reveal forgotten voyages and lost connections between distant peoples. These plants didn't cross oceans by themselves. They were carried by skilled mariners, navigators who braved the unknown seas, forging links between continents. The crops on our plates today are living proof of a hidden network that once connected Africa and the Americas, reminding us that our world has always been more connected than we imagine. The Olmec Civilization, one of the earliest in Mesoamerica, left behind colossal stone heads carved from basalt. These heads, some weighing up to 40 tons, display features that many scholars and observers have noted as strikingly similar to those of Africans. Broad noses, full lips, and unique cranial shapes that stand out from other indigenous art of the region. These stone heads are not isolated anomalies. Throughout Mesoamerican art, we find figurines and statues with non-native facial features, hinting at a broader tapestry of cultural exchange. Such depictions suggest the possibility of contact with Africans and perhaps other distant peoples, long before Columbus set foot in the New World. Adding to the intrigue are stories and occasional discoveries of Egyptian-style artifacts and even mummies found in the Americas. While these claims remain controversial and hotly debated among historians, they add fascinating pieces to an ever-growing puzzle. Remarkably, mummification techniques practiced in the Americas, which predate African mummies, closely mirror those of ancient Egypt and Africa. From the careful removal of organs to the use of resins and intricate wrappings, these similarities suggest a shared knowledge or parallel development that is difficult to ignore. Even more compelling, scientific analysis has revealed traces of American narcotics, such as tobacco and coca, in Egyptian mummies. This surprising evidence points to the possibility of transoceanic contact and the exchange of goods and ideas across vast distances. These artifacts and practices serve as silent voices from the past, challenging the long-held belief that ancient America was a closed, isolated world. Instead, they invite us to reconsider the complexity and reach of early civilizations. The enduring mystery of the Olmec heads, combined with persistent legends and oral histories, suggests that the Americas may have been a destination for explorers, traders, and adventurers from far-off lands. The evidence is there, woven into stone, preserved in mummies and displayed in museums, if we choose to see it and remain open to the possibilities of our shared human story. Critics often claim that ancient peoples lacked the technology or knowledge to cross the vast Atlantic Ocean, but both history and modern science suggest a different story, one filled with ingenuity and daring exploration. Egyptians were master shipbuilders, constructing massive, seaworthy vessels. Even their papyrus boats, as explorer Thor Heyerdahl famously demonstrated with his Ra expeditions, were capable of surviving long ocean journeys and could potentially reach the Americas, challenging our assumptions about ancient travel. West African empires, especially Mali, developed rich maritime traditions, building sturdy boats and navigating complex river and coastal systems, which laid the foundation for ambitious oceanic voyages. In 1311, Emperor Abubakar II of Mali is said to have launched a grand fleet westward into the Atlantic, seeking new lands, an expedition shrouded in mystery, as neither he nor his ships ever returned. The Atlantic's powerful currents, such as the Canary and North Equatorial, naturally carry vessels from the African coast directly toward the Americas, creating a maritime highway across the ocean. For skilled mariners, these currents made the daunting crossing not just possible, but even likely, especially for those with the courage and expertise to attempt such journeys. Ancient navigators were keen observers of the stars, winds, and waves, using sophisticated tools and knowledge to guide their ships along these ocean highways. The combination of advanced shipbuilding, a spirit of exploration, and the assistance of natural ocean currents makes the idea of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact not just possible but entirely plausible. So the real question isn't whether ancient peoples could cross the Atlantic, but rather, how often did they make this incredible journey, and what stories remain lost to history? The evidence, botanical, archaeological, cultural, historical, and navigational, forms a compelling case for pre-Columbian contact. Mainstream skepticism often dismisses each piece, but together, the pattern is undeniable. If these contacts happened, our view of history is fundamentally flawed. The world was more connected than we've been taught. It restores Africa's legacy of exploration and innovation and shows the Americas as part of a global network. The past is more complex and interconnected than we imagined. The question of pre-Columbian contact invites us to rethink history and remain open to new discoveries. What other secrets might we uncover as we keep searching? The story of humanity is far from finished. In the 1920s, a Harvard professor published research that should have demolished the entire white myth of Columbus's discovery of the Americas. His findings were so explosive, so contrary to everything we'd been taught about American history, that the academic world didn't know what to do with them. That professor was Leo Wiener, and he was about to uncover evidence that African explorers hadn't just reached America before Columbus. They'd been trading with the natives centuries before Europe even dreamed of crossing the Atlantic. Leo Wiener was born in Russia. Weiner's path to this earth-shattering discovery began with a failed dream. He had immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century, heading to British Honduras to open a vegetarian commune. But while that venture collapsed, what he found in Mesoamerica would prove far more significant. After returning to the United States and becoming a professor at Harvard University, Weiner began piecing together something extraordinary during his time in Mesoamerica. He had noticed countless linguistic and botanical connections that defied conventional history, words in local languages that matched perfectly with African Bantu and Arabic plants that shouldn't have been their plants that originated in Africa, flourishing in American soil long before any European ship had crossed the ocean. These discoveries were so numerous, so undeniable, that between 1920 and 1922, Weiner compiled them into an extensive 3-volume work titled Africa and the Discovery of America. When Columbus brought those Guan spearheads back to Spain, he did something that would set the pattern for centuries of historical suppression. He had them analyzed, confirmed their African origin, and then nothing more was said about these extraordinary artifacts that proved Africans had been trading with the Americas long before European arrival. Why the silence? The answer lies in Spain's colonial ambitions. You see, it was in Spain's best interest to suppress any challenges to their discovery and claims of the islands of the West Indies. After all, you can't claim to be the discoverer of something if evidence shows others had already been there for centuries. Just look at the scale of Spain's investment in this narrative. For Columbus's second voyage in 1493, Spain equipped him with an invasion force that dwarfed his first expedition. This was going to be a conquest of the Americas, all in the name of God and the glorious Spanish Empire. The new expedition was 10 times larger than the first. Columbus himself became part of this historical rewrite. As he traveled through the Caribbean, he went about whimsically renaming every island he could find. Native names like Guanahani and Hernando de Soto were systematically replaced with European ones. The consequences of this cover-up were devastating. Within 5 years of Columbus's arrival in the New World, 90% of the indigenous population had died from disease or murder. With them died the oral histories, the testimonies, and the living memory of African contact that had existed for centuries. This systematic eraser worked so well that even as late as 2018, history textbooks told a very specific story according to historian James W. Lowen's examination of textbooks up until 2018. While some books would mention the possibility of Vikings, Norse, or even Irish reaching America first, not one textbook, old or new, mentioned the West Africans. Just think about it. Growing up, have you ever heard stories of African-American traders in America? Nope, you were told the same historical BS that was fed to all of us. We were told that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and that he was the first one to find America and bring civilization to its shores. This is all lies. African Moors beat the pale man to it, and pale white men for centuries rewrote history and ignored straight facts just to perpetuate a narrative of white supremacy. Here's something your history books won't tell you. Africans had ships, not just ships. They had 4 distinct types of vessels, and they'd been building them for thousands of years before Columbus was even born. The evidence, it's literally carved in stone ancient Nubian pottery from 3000 BC, showing detailed paintings of sophisticated vessels, long-holed boats, papyrus rafts, and hollowed-out dufuna canoes. Another painting, even older, dating from 3500 BC, shows a bird's-eye view of a riverboat in Chad. These weren't just crude drawings, they were technical documentation of advanced shipbuilding capabilities. But the real proof of Africa's maritime power comes from European sources themselves. In the 1500s, just a few years after Columbus's voyage, Portuguese captain Pacheco Pereira wrote something remarkable about the ships he found in Guinea. He said, "In this country can be found the largest canoes made of a single trunk. Some are so large that they hold 80 men. Think about that for a second. Single trunk canoes big enough to hold 80 men. These weren't primitive rafts, these were sophisticated vessels built by master shipwrights. The West Africans had even developed an early form of the catamaran, lashing 2 dugout canoes together side by side. A technique so seaworthy that no one questioned similar designs used by Polynesian sailors. Yet for some reason, it was so unheard of that Africans could have done something similar and sailed their way to the Americas. But if you think 80-men canoes are impressive, wait until you hear about what happened in 1311. Islamic historian Amir Hajib reported something that should be in every history textbook. He documented voyages west from Mali, happening in 1311, a full 150 years before Columbus set sail. When he asked the Mali emperor about these Atlantic voyages, what he learned was astonishing. The emperor, shown in historical records holding a globe made of solid gold, revealed that his predecessor had launched an expedition that would dwarf Columbus's journey. We're talking about 200 ships filled with men, another 200 ships loaded with food, gold, water, and enough provisions for 2 years at sea. The African emperor's instructions were simple but ambitious: sail west, and don't return until you either find something or run out of supplies. Now here's where the story takes a mysterious turn. Out of all these ships, only one returned. The captains report they had encountered what seemed like a river with a strong current flowing in the open sea. He was the last ship in line, and when he saw the others disappear into this current, he turned back. The others were never seen again. Modern ocean current maps show exactly what these sailors might have encountered. There are 2 circular rivers in the Atlantic, massive ocean currents that could have carried African ships straight to the Americas. From the Angola region, ships could ride the currents up towards the equator and westward, or from the western coast of Africa, north of the equator, they could travel eastward along the same current. Portuguese sources confirmed that they had heard stories of African traders visiting Brazil in the mid-1400s to demonstrate that such voyages were possible. Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl used ancient shipbuilding techniques to construct and sail the Ra 1 and Ra 2 in 1969 and 1970, proving that even ancient vessel designs could handle transatlantic crossings. The math adds up to a sailing vessel typically averaging about 100 miles per day, even without sails. Even a simple raft or reed boat could manage about 60 miles per day in ocean currents. The distance between Africa and South America, it's actually shorter than Columbus's route across the Atlantic. When Vasco Núñez de Balboa ventured into Panama in 1513, he encountered something that shattered the European narrative. His official records, logged documents of meeting members of an Ethiopian tribe, an entire village of black inhabitants located 2 days' journeys inland. According to his detailed records, these weren't recent arrivals the evidence suggested. They had settled there long before any European ships touched American shores. Balboa's account stands among dozens of similar reports. At least 12 different European explorers documented encountering black populations upon reaching the New World. But the most monumental evidence quite literally towers above the rest. In southeastern Mexico, 18 colossal stone heads rise from the earth, each one facing eastward across the Atlantic. Each head required quarrying massive stone blocks and hauling them 75 miles across difficult terrain, a feat that would challenge even modern engineering. Archaeologist José María Melgar y Serrano, upon first uncovering these Olmec heads, immediately recognized their significance. The facial features were, in his words, amazingly like African blacks. Every head bears distinctive headgear or protective helmets with unmistakably African characteristics. Broad noses, full lips, and pronounced facial features that mirror West African populations. Some academics attempted to dismiss these monuments as depictions of overweight babies. The presence of military headgear and mature facial features render such explanations absurd. The scale of effort quarrying, transporting, carving, and erecting these massive monuments speaks to their profound importance in Olmec society. In the Temple of the Warriors at Chichen Itza, murals tell an even more complex story. The artwork clearly depicts 3 distinct races. It shows black Indian allies battling against white invaders. The latter, identified by their long blonde hair and distinctive weaponry, appear to be barbaric warriors. The crucial detail. The murals show dark-skinned Olmec fighting alongside their children, the Maya and Aztec, indicating they had been integrated into Mesoamerican society long enough to form military alliances. The physical evidence even extends beneath the soil. Archaeologists have unearthed pre-Columbian African skeletons throughout the Americas, dating from 800 BCE to 300 CE. These remains span more than a millennium, proving sustained African presence across multiple generations, centuries before Columbus set sail. Think about that: black people had sailed across to the Americas and united with the native population to help fight against the white man. Some people say no, these people weren't from Africa. They were already here. fact still remains that Nubians are the first at everything. No wonder this story isn't shared in any history textbooks. If people knew this fact, there would be cries to actually fix the entire whitewashed educational system that has brainwashed our communities for generations. Consider the timeline between 800 BCE and 300 CE, while Europe remained centuries away from developing adequate seafaring technology. Africans had already crossed the Atlantic and established communities substantial enough to warrant massive stone monuments. The Olmec Civilization, dated to at least 900 BCE, demonstrates such strong African influences that leading historian Michael Coe declared, "There is not the slightest doubt that all later civilizations in Mexico and Central America rest ultimately on Mech foundations, the Olmec society. They didn't just erect stone monuments. They introduced written language, sophisticated astronomy, arts, and mathematics to Mesoamerica. They built the first cities in Mexico. Their influence shaped every subsequent civilization in the region, from the Maya to the Aztecs." Ask yourself how a civilization was capable of hauling multiple-ton stone blocks across 75 miles of terrain. A people who mastered astronomical calculations and developed sophisticated mathematics just disappear from history. The answer lies in what historian Samuel D. Marvel revealed about the American academic establishment as a subject for research. The possibility of African discovery of America has never been a tempting one for American historians. Yeah, no kidding. Marvel's observation cuts deeper in his analysis of historical narratives. He explains, "We choose our own history, or more accurately, we select those vistas of history that have the promise of the greatest satisfaction for ourselves." So, America's academic institutions have deliberately avoided exploring African discoveries because the truth threatens a fundamental narrative of European supremacy. This is further supported by James Loewen's examinations of American textbooks through 2018. His findings expose a pattern. Textbooks readily acknowledge the possibility of Vikings reaching America first. Some even entertain theories about Norse or Irish arrivals, but not a single textbook, old or new, mentions West African voyages. The eraser worked so perfectly that by the time evidence began surfacing, the colossal heads, the pre-Columbian skeletons, academics had already constructed an impenetrable wall of skepticism. Any suggestion of African maritime achievement faced immediate dismissal, seafaring representing Europe and the white man's crowning achievement. After all, it was the technology that enabled their domination of the world. The idea that black Africans had mastered the Atlantic Ocean centuries before Columbus threatened the very foundation of European colonial legitimacy. The notion that Africans reached America, first established trade routes, influenced civilizations, and left monumental evidence of their presence that would require rewriting every history book on the shelf, even when the Olmec heads stared back with undeniably African features, when carbon dating proved African presence centuries before Columbus, when metallurgical evidence showed precise African techniques in pre-Columbian weapons. The academic establishment chose silence. In 4 centuries of American historical scholarship, no one bothered to ask why ancient Mexican monuments bore African faces. No one questioned why Columbus found spearheads made with precise African metallurgical techniques. No one wondered why Balboa encountered entire villages of Ethiopian inhabitants in Panama. The truth remained buried not because it was hidden, but because, as Marvel explained, we willingly chose a different history, one that satisfied our cultural narrative. One that kept Europe at the center of human achievement, and one that relegated Africa to the margins of world history. In 1492, Christopher Columbus stood on those shores holding evidence of an inconvenient truth. Spearheads that proved Africans had mastered the Atlantic centuries before him. That evidence disappeared into the depths of history, just as he intended, but truth has a way of resurfacing. The colossal heads still stand facing east across the Atlantic. The ancient African skeletons still rest in American soil. The temple murals still show their alliances, and the maritime records still tell their stories of African ships crossing the ocean centuries before Columbus set sail. We began this story with a single piece of evidence in Columbus's hands. We ended with an undeniable truth. When Columbus reached the Americas, he wasn't making a discovery. He was interrupting a centuries-old conversation between Africa and America. A conversation written in gold-tipped spears carved in stone heads painted on temple walls and buried in the very DNA of American civilization. So the next time someone comes up to you and starts ranting about how Columbus discovered America, give them a piece of real history. If you're interested in learning about more Nubian history that's been hidden from us, go ahead and check out our videos in the Native American Chief School playlist, and as always, thanks for watching.